My name's John Cannon-Guinness, and I'm joined by journalist, PR practitioner, and confirmed grouch Alexander Korn. And
Hello.
for this episode, we're going to be joined by PR guru Larissa Mirabelli and our subject matter expert for today, Anthony Battani, who's a senior associate partner with a leading international talent management firm, but that's not the real claim to fame. He's actually a registered psychologist. APRA is apparently the licensing body. Who knew? Registered psychologist with over 40 years of experience, and he'll be helping us with this topic of the anxiety epidemic and why it's happening and what social media has to do with it. So, Tony, I'd like to go to you first with some stats, and then a three-part question. So, I'm going to eat the stats.
Yes, according to recent stats, which we made up 5 minutes ago, more than 78% of the total Australian population is active on social media, and we spend a staggering 1 hour and 51 minutes a day on social media each, which is a lot of time.
Which is a lot of time, yeah. So there's a three-part question. Has social media, and Larissa, feel free to jump in at any time as well, has social media made us more gullible and easier to scare, or have we always been like that? And that's not to say that there aren't serious issues to worry about, but have we always been easy to scare? Or is it a modern phenomenon? Two, have we just solved so many issues, as Nostradamus suggested? Famine, pestilence, wars aren't quite as constant as they are, although there's a few, it's not quite as constant. Have we solved so many issues that we're jumping at shadows? We're trying to find things to worry about that we can't do anything about. And three is being constantly connected, making it easier to magnify that sort of anxiety.
Okay, so great questions. The first one about are we more gullible, easy to scare? Humans haven't changed, and social media's got nothing to do with it. Why do we scare? Because we're worried about the tiger that's going to bite us. We've got brains that are hardwired to do flight or fight. If we weren't hardwired to be scared, there wouldn't be 8 billion of us right here on the planet right now. And we have that radar that looks out for risks and dangers, and that comes into play when we're on social media. So we go looking for stuff that concerns us. We react to things that concern us. And the product that we're putting on social media is ourselves. And what happens there is we've got an algorithm that's driving what we see. And so the things that we're concerned about and we go looking for, we get more of and we get scareder.
So it's confirmation bias.
Exactly. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy.
So one of the things you should pick up there on is you said the product that when we go on social media is ourselves. That's confirming what we all know in the marketing game, that if you don't pay for something online, you're the product. Right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And so when I say that you're putting out there, you're putting out your concerns, you're putting out your likes, you're putting out your crazy ideas, and you're inviting more and more people to buy into that than ever happened before. You used to be able to do that in the pub and you get slapped down. You do it on social media and you get jumped on.
So that was what we were talking about before in the interview, which is this amplification of stupidity. It's instant now, right? And global, yeah. Because as you said before in the pub, somebody would say, "Well, that's just John. He's being an idiot and he's pissed." So that's,
And interestingly, the Greeks were onto this very early. There's a guy called Narcissus who was pretty thirsty, and he bent over to have a drink from a pond and saw his reflection. And he was so enamoured of his reflection that he's just stayed there looking at it, stopped eating, stopped sleeping, and died.
I have to say it's been tempting, but I haven't fallen prey to it yet, but nonetheless.
There's another thing going on. Psychologists call it deflection, that we often avoid doing the little things we need to do to fix our own lives by focusing on stuff that we can do nothing about, by catastrophizing about things that are going to happen to us or happening to the world. And we get a lot of that again on social media. We can get enraged, we can get concerned, we can go out and march about something, and it's not going to make a damn bit of difference to our immediate situation, but we feel good about it. We feel as though we're somehow engaging with that and doing something about it. But all we're doing is jumping on a bandwagon often.
Larissa, if I can bring you in here, as a mum of three, or one's a teenager now, and two preteens, you can burst into song at any moment. As a mum, kids are subject to this sort of input all the time. Are your tribe influenced by this, or are you trying to moderate that influence a bit?
Yeah, I think my husband and I made the conscious decision to try and extend their childhoods. So we know from the data that as of 2012, mental health issues skyrocketed. It was the introduction of social media. Lots of the social psychologists talk about it. Jonathan Haidt, for example, is one who's all over it, but it's all English-speaking markets. It's US, it's UK, it's New Zealand, it's Australia and Northern Europe, and we're all seeing the same trends. And so there are all of these suggestions in terms of how you can counter it. But I think limiting or, sort of delaying access to smartphones, to social media is one obvious way to try and sort of, put a bit more of a handle on it.
So you've taken a decision to actually limit their access yourself
Yes.
as a parent,
Yes,
rather than relying on a government to put some sort of ban on.
totally. I think, my kids have grown up with boundaries their whole lives. It's not like my son's turned 13. I've said, well, actually, here are all your new boundaries. They're used to having boundaries. They're used to having time limits on, the use of Nintendo or time playing games on iPads and things like that. And we sort of delayed the introduction even of iPads and things in our house. But we also don't live in the centre of a metropolitan sort of area. We're not in a capital city. We're a little bit further out. And so there is more of that nature-based play and being out with your mates and riding bikes and things that perhaps in the cities we've lost sight of a little bit more, or parents are busy. And it's not to say that we're not busy.
This thing about we are so comfortable that we jump at shadows because we want to find something to be afraid about, but also we're also looking for constant validation all the time.
Yeah, look, there's two parts to that. Social media presents the worst possible world, and we end up with, say, Extinction Rebellion. A few facts about extinction in Australia. Australia, Brazil, Madagascar have 70% of the world's biodiversity. Australia has about up to 700,000 unique species. Since 1788, 2,118 of these have disappeared. That's 0.3%. There's the data is very different from the reaction to the story.
Yeah. So, and venturing into dangerous territory, it's similar. It's similar to the oppressed classes we hear about. So you hear about transphobia and this sort of thing, and people being oppressed. But when you look at the actual numbers, they're infinitesimal.
They are.
I think one of the base feeders of this whole nature of society has been 24-hour news cycles. News has to be, the news media has to fill the space.
Yeah.
And by filling the space in a competitive environment, you've got to have the most outlandish and outstanding stories to get eyeballs, to get people to watch.
Yeah, well, the 24-hour news cycle has a lot to answer for.
And my concern is that if we keep pumping out that message that whether it's climate change, whether it's Third World War coming up, that this is so bad and so catastrophic for everyone concerned that there's almost nothing we can do about it, we lose agency. We lose the ability to shape our own lives and make decisions about what we can do.
But has that been driven by the populace, or has that been driven by government trying to take over more aspects of people's lives and them just sitting back and allowing government to do that without fighting for their rights? Or
it becomes an excuse. And we had a great example recently when we were talking here in this state about the overspend on the big spend project and everything's over budget. And we then get told that there was COVID and there's the war in Ukraine. It makes me think of the little kid that is mucking around at home and drops a prized ornament and breaks it, and everyone sees it, and the child says, "It wasn't me," or "He made me do it,"
And then they just go, okay.
In other words, I'm not responsible. And it takes me into another area of this positivity and everything's got to be great. Why does it have to be? Why can't we be angry? We can be angry. We should be angry at injustice. Why shouldn't we express grief? Why shouldn't we be depressed from time to time? They're human conditions. They make us human. And yet we've got a messaging, again, on social media that you should be happy or you should look great or that you should be going to this and enjoying that. This perfect world is being presented and we're not giving the person receiving that message the resilience or the skills to say, well, hang on a minute, I don't want to do that, or I don't agree with that, or I'm a bit upset today, I won't go and join my friends. We delegitimise that human reaction that's quite appropriate.
And I think that's the problem, isn't it? It's all curated content these days. It's paid for. There are plenty of people pulling strings in the background to get the right result.
So if I can jump in, there's two things. One, a bit of statistic to go with it. According to 2022 stats, so they're now quite old in social media terms, 48% of 11 to 13-year-olds had social media accounts in Australia. That's absurd. At least I think it's absurd.
Totally agree.
What do they have to say?
Well, that's a very good question.
If you talk to parents, they will say, "Oh, but they've friended me and I'm watching what they're doing and what you can't see is the direct messaging and stuff that's going on in the background. But once you bring in social media, you have sort of this huge exponential growth in mental health challenges. And these kids just cannot separate the wheat from the chaff.
But they can't measure, they feel that they don't measure up to the people they see portrayed on social media as being the benchmark or the idol or the level that they should be getting to.
Tony, I mean, that's one for you, right? I mean, how can children, at what age can they actually decipher all of this? Are they able to, even though they might know that it says hashtag sponsored, you know, they know that it's sponsored, but do they actually know?
They know, but they're fearful of stepping out of line, I reckon.
Because fitting in is very important.
Because fitting in is the most important thing, and the beauty of the and the power of the AI that drives the algorithm is that it senses your vulnerabilities and your concerns, and it feeds you more. It gives you factoids, it gives you information that matches your concerns. It might feed a conspiracy theory. It might speed an end of times idea, and voila, we've got you. And, you know, I call it drinking your own bathwater or going down the rabbit hole and eventually you decide to vote green.
Alexander, I mean, I don't think you're on TikTok last time I checked.
No, look, I'm pleased to say I've never made a TikTok video, and I hope I've never started any.
Yes. Journalism used to be somewhere where people would go to get some sort of objective fact, kind of level off that fear factor, yeah? There's a great line in the Eagles did a comeback album in the early 2000s called Out of Eden, which was essentially a protest album about the Iraqi war. And it says, journalism dead and gone.
I think it has been. As I mentioned before, I think the 24-hour news cycle has a role to play in that. But journalists used to have to undertake a degree or a cadetship. They had to be mentored. They had to understand about morals and ethics. And they also had a sub-editor keeping them in line and keeping them on the straight and narrow in terms of what they could say legally and what they should be saying factually. Well, there are still some journalists left who are illiterate as well. I could be one of them. But today, any fool can freely broadcast drivel and be paid handsomely for it. In fact, maybe I'm doing that right now.
If you've never done the hard yards to find out the true story or what purports to be the true story, how can you assess it? How can you evaluate it?
One of the things that I think that is fairly critical is that society generally has taken on this mantra that diversity is something that we should all aspire to and aim for. And diversity in gender has become quite a popular cause.
Oh, now
but,
we're in touchy topics.
But
Yes.
but diversity of ideas and thoughts and having discussions about diverse ideas seems to be completely off the agenda.
And Tony, you mentioned eventually you're going to vote Green. That happens when you've closed your mind to any critical analysis and there's just this view of the world.
How do we deal with complexity? How do we deal with situations that we don't understand? We adopt a belief, or we accept that black rather than white. It makes life a lot simpler. You send a young person, say, for military training. They rock up as an individual. 2 weeks later, after a recruit course, they'll do anything for the group. It's a combination of wanting to please the group, but also not wanting to bear the consequences of stepping outside the group. And social media is effectively doing that. A random example of groupthink. I walk past restaurants, cafes really, in the city, and I see a queue. And I look and I say to Mandy, the food in there is not that good. Why are they queuing up? They're queuing up because somebody's posted something on TikTok or Instagram, and they don't worry that they have to queue for an hour. What they do is photograph themselves in the queue so they can post that they're in the queue going to the place where they're supposed to go, where the food's supposed to be good. They don't care whether the food's good or not.
That's irrelevant.
What they care about is being seen to be waiting in the queue with other people who want that. And what that's saying to me is not only have we got the people running the sites on social media who are deliberately manipulating a situation, but we've got recipients feeding it and encouraging it. It's almost like a perfect marriage. Both sides thinking this may not work out, but we've got each other, and let's go as hard as we can.
There's also that element in terms of, how much information people can take on board, and that question about you've got, thousands of messages coming at you every minute of every day, and the attention span has changed. So you see that in children. I've had sleepovers at my house, and the kids cannot sit there and watch a movie. There's a lot of kids who can't do it anymore. They can't sit there for 2 hours because they're so used to, short, sharp and shiny that they can't do those things that we did sort of.
Just they're magpies. Look at this
Totally.
shiny thing over here.
Totally. So it's the same for children as it is for adults. And as a communicator, it's really hard to understand. You've got to get across a really important message. How are you going to do it? How do you make it into bite-sized chunks for some of the audience? But then for people who want to do the deep dive, then where do you place that message? It's a real challenge.
So you mentioned that, and I'll let you talk a little bit more about how everyone wants to be happy all the time. That's not a natural condition, right? So therefore we mythologise being unhappy, which is weird and probably destructive. Secondly, were we a lot happier when we didn't know what was going on in the world all the time because there was a war over somewhere else?
There was an apocryphal politics exam set at the University of Melbourne, and the question asked of the political science students was, it's said of Australians that they're uninterested in politics and they're only concerned about their own self-interest. Please comment. And one student wrote, "Don't know, don't care."
A grade A student, I'm sure.
What a brilliant answer.
They got a high distinction.
What a great answer. What a great answer.
There is a good aspect to social media, and you see it sometimes. And again, today there's a results of a poll out, a reach out, a mental health organisation has surveyed 2,000 young people, and they've found that in that age range, 14 to early 20s, 2/3 of kids who are experiencing some sort of mental health issue go online to seek assistance or to seek answers, and they do it in the middle of the night. In other words, they're doing it at a time where they don't want to expose themselves to parents or others. And so there's a tool there that wasn't available before that enables some good stuff to be sourced.
Is that the difference between the internet and social media? Are they going on social media to look for that information, or are they just searching it on the internet?
They're searching. Yeah, they're searching. You're right. And they might be having a mental issue because of the social media.
So I'm very cynical about what comes in the media because of my job. So I'm always saying to my kids, they say, "Oh, did you know about this?" And I said, "Well, where did that data come from? Who's behind the data?"
You have kids who know what data is?
Well, no, that's where we're talking all this through now. Follow the money is always my question.
Yes, we all know about follow the money.
Follow the money, because that ultimately tells you what's coming out the other end.
Yep.
And so I do challenge my kids a little bit to think outside the square and to not necessarily believe everything they're told. But I think that they are actually introducing classes like that on critical thinking and how you evaluate and assess it. I think it is actually coming in to some schools.
So is this coming in a cycle, and to bring this conversation in this, because things generally go in cyclic in nature. There's too much of one, and then we have a reaction to it, and so on and so forth. So maybe we're starting to see the beginnings of the genesis of that. But to bring the conversation back to a cycle, it may seem like it's the end of the world, but it's not really the end of the world. It's just our perception. And we now have media and access to information that will reinforce that perception rather than put it in the right sort of context of, that's not really your problem. To your point, Tony, if we come back to the central theme, it's social media. It's not necessarily stupid amplified, but it certainly is emotion amplified.
Yes.
And validated.
Yeah. And it uses stupid to amplify emotion.
I wonder what the long-term consequences will be for the generation that's grown up attached to digital devices, where they haven't been able to interact socially at a young age with their peers. Will they not be able to interact socially with their peers as they age, and will that cause even greater societal disintegration as people don't know how to talk to each other and don't know how to converse?
Oh, there's a bigger question. Does it stop reproduction? I mean, if you
They're
can't...
absorbed in their virtual worlds.
If you're absorbed in your virtual world, you're in your mother's basement till you're 35, you ain't making babies.
And there are effects of screen-based preoccupation, and they're more immediate. There are eye issues, there are concentration issues, there are a whole lot of physiological and mental issues. And these issues that are arising, or so-called issues, are not solved by banning anything. There are a number of streams of argument. One is about free speech anyway, and what sort of society do you want to live in. But as soon as you ban something, what does a human being do?
Find a way
wow,
around
that
it.
Must be pretty good. I've got to find a way to get in there. I've got to find a way to using that substance or doing that thing or going to that place. Doesn't do a damn thing. It's the step before that the parent is responsible for largely, and that's somewhat being missed, to build the resilience, to build the framework in the kid that enables that kid to say, look at people at a party and they've got some tablets, and look at those people and say, that's not for me, they're losers.
I just want to bring this thing back to probably our last topic, which is the imminent government bill to try and control social media for youngsters. I mean, it seems like a laudable thing. Like a lot of these things, they all seem to be laudable and nice things to do. To your point, you ban something, you make it more desirable, particularly to young people.
What are the parameters for it?
Yeah,
How do you stop mission creep?
then we venture into the whole question of the misinformation bill, which is
yeah.
who determines. So that this is Orwellian. The Ministry for Truth. Yeah.
Here's a practical example of the difference between me, and I'm reasonably computer literate, and one of my grandsons who came over to help me look at the security of my home system. And while I went to make a coffee, I came back and he had 12 dialogue boxes open on the screen, and he was all over the place, and he drilled down so far that I didn't even know these levels of being able to get into the software existed. And to him, it was second nature. And
How old is he, 6?
14. 14. And what, we're going to stop him being on social media?
And that is what annoys me the most, is that they are the most profitable businesses in the world. They have the most intelligent minds working on everything. They could change everything in a moment, but they choose not to because it's too profitable to leave it as it is. And so, you know, that's ultimately the problem. They don't care. No matter what they say, half of the architects are horrified with what they've created. The other half, questionable morals and ethics, I'd suggest.
Just bought a new penthouse in New York.
Sort
So
of
that
society.
segues perfectly into the whole concept of a misinformation bill, and we'll probably finish off on that topic. The whole idea to me is anathema of misinformation. The whole concept of free speech is that the village idiot can say whatever he or she wants to say. That's the concept of free speech, and we're free to agree or disagree or ignore as we think is fit. That a government can seem to think that it can determine through some alleged independent body that they've set up that they will decide what you will or will not hear or see is, to me, completely anathema. It is Orwellian. It is truly the ministry of truth. And it only takes a very, very small step to get from that position of this is misinformation to no, this is the real truth as we want you to see it. And that's an extremely dangerous thing in my view in our society, and we should fight tooth and nail against that. That's my editorial bit. But why do we feel that there is a need to legislate what people can stupidly say if they wish to?
Well, it's frustration, I think, on the part of politicians.
It's the latest example of taking away freedoms that we thought we had, that we started to lose in the war on terror, that we started to lose in COVID. We said to the politicians, okay, come up with some solutions. And they
Lock
came
us
up
up.
with some solutions which fundamentally prescribe a lot of the things that we can and can't do.
Can't leave your house and travel more than 5 kilometres.
And let's
Or wear a
put
mask.
the drone up and just make sure that you're doing
safe.
exactly what you've been asked to do.
You know, I'm very, very, very dubious about, as much as we've talked about social media being a bit of an issue, it's a significant issue, very dubious about governments trying to control what is true and what's not. So, what have we learnt? Well, we've learnt that all these topics are far more complex and much, much more interesting. So, to wrap it up, we don't think it's the end of the world?
No.
No?
Not yet.
It definitely isn't the end of the world. The world changes all the time, and the genius of humans is that they find ways to adapt.
I think probably the end of the world was presaged when Mr. Gutenberg invented his first press machine, printing press.
Yes.
And that would have been very frightening, particularly to the church at that time, because they'd lost the monopoly on dissemination of information.
That's it from us. It isn't the end of the world. Social media has got a role to play in good and evil, just like every other tool we've ever had, from Gutenberg's printing press to the first cave paintings and onwards. Thank you very much. Thanks to Tony, Larissa.
And if you like what you've seen, tell us about it on social media.